You ever have one of those moments where everything you thought was solid just crumbles beneath your feet? Like you're walking on thin ice, thinking everything's fine, and then you crack. That's exactly how I felt when I discovered my wife, Sarah, had been cheating on me. It wasn't something vague or uncertain, no, I had cold, hard proof staring me in the face. Text messages that didn't make sense unless you read between the lines. Late-night phone calls she always brushed off as work stuff. And then there was that damn hotel receipt, a single piece of paper that sealed her fate. We'd been married for 8 years. 8 long, happy, or so I thought, years. We bought a house together, dreamed about kids, talked about growing old side by side. Hell, we even picked out names for our future children during lazy Sunday mornings over coffee. But all those dreams? They were built on lies. Lies stacked so high they blocked out the truth. Lies that ate away at my trust until there was nothing left but anger and hurt. At first, I couldn't believe it. I mean, Sarah? My Sarah? The woman who kissed me goodbye every morning with a smile that could light up a room? No way. There had to be some kind of explanation, right? Maybe the texts were innocent misunderstandings. Maybe the late-night calls really were work-related. But deep down, I knew better. Deep down, I could feel it, the betrayal festering inside me like an open wound. It started small. A missed call here, a strange text there. Nothing too alarming at first. But over time, the little things added up. Like how she'd suddenly become glued to her phone whenever I walked into the room. Or how she'd jump if I accidentally touched her while reaching for something. She stopped wearing her wedding ring around the house, saying it got in the way when she cooked or cleaned. At the time, I didn't think much of it. Now, looking back, it seems so obvious. So glaringly clear. But the final straw came when I found that receipt. It wasn't even hidden well, it was sitting right there on the kitchen counter, tucked under a pile of mail like she didn't care if I saw it or not. The name of the hotel caught my eye first. Not exactly a budget-friendly place, either. This was one of those upscale joints with valet parking and fancy robes in the closets. The same kind of place we used to joke about staying at for our anniversary, except now it represented something entirely different. I stared at the receipt for what felt like hours. My hand shook as I turned it over, searching for any clue that might explain why Sarah would need a hotel room on a random Tuesday night. Was she traveling for work? No, she told me she was home all day catching up on laundry. Needing a friend? Possible, but why lie about it? Why go through the trouble of booking a room instead of just meeting somewhere public? And then it hit me. Hard. Like a punch to the gut that knocked the wind out of me. She wasn't alone in that room. Someone else was with her. Someone who wasn't me. I don't remember what happened next. All I know is that I ended up sitting on the floor of the kitchen, the receipt clutched tightly in my hand, tears streaming down my face. I felt sick, physically ill. Betrayed. Humiliated. Angry. Every emotion imaginable rolled into one giant wave that threatened to drown me. How could she do this? After everything we'd been through, after all the promises we made to each other, how could she throw it all away? For days, I wrestled with what to do. Part of me wanted to confront her immediately, demand answers, scream until my voice gave out. Another part of me wanted to pretend I hadn't seen the receipt, bury my head in the sand, and hope it would all go away. Neither option felt right. Neither option solved anything. So I did what any rational person would do, I waited. I bided my time, gathering evidence, piecing together the puzzle bit by bit. That's when I truly began to see Sarah for who she really was. Not the loving, devoted wife I thought I knew, but someone else entirely. Someone who lied effortlessly, who manipulated situations to suit her needs, who cared more about appearances than honesty. Someone who didn't deserve my trust or my love. Once I accepted that fact, a strange calm washed over me. The initial shock and pain faded, replaced by something colder, sharper. Determination. If Sarah wanted to play games, then fine. I'd play too. But unlike her, I wasn't going to cheat. I wasn't going to lie. No, I was going to give her exactly what she deserved, a taste of her own medicine. The thing about people who cheat is that they always think they're smarter than everyone else. They convinced themselves they're untouchable, invisible, invincible. And Sarah? Oh, she was the queen of self-delusion. She strutted around the house like nothing was wrong, acting like the perfect wife while secretly planning her next rendezvous with Greg, the coworker she'd been sneaking around with. Greg. Just saying his name made my blood boil. Who the hell did he think he was, waltzing into my marriage like he owned the place? He probably thought he was doing me a favor by taking Sarah off my hands. Poor bastard didn't realize he was playing with fire. But I digress. Back to the plan. If Sarah wanted to keep up the charade, then I was more than happy to oblige. I played along, pretending I didn't notice anything unusual. In fact, I went out of my way to act normal, maybe even a little distant. Let her think I was distracted, preoccupied with work or hobbies or whatever excuse she cooked up in her head. The less suspicious I seemed, the better. Meanwhile, I started preparing. First, I invested in a few discreet cameras. Nothing fancy, just enough to cover the key areas of the house, the bedroom, the living room, the kitchen. I positioned them strategically, making sure they blended in with the surroundings. From the outside, they looked like ordinary household items: a smoke detector, a digital clock, a decorative vase. But on the inside, they were recording every move Sarah and Greg made. Next, I worked on my alibi. I needed a reason to be gone when they inevitably showed up. Something believable, something that wouldn't raise any red flags. Fishing trip with friends? Perfect. Sarah knew I occasionally went fishing with the guys, so it wouldn't seem out of the ordinary. Plus, it gave me plenty of time to set everything up without arousing suspicion. The weekend finally arrived, and I put my plan into motion. Early Saturday morning, I packed a bag like I was heading out of town, kissed Sarah goodbye, forcing myself not to gag, and drove away. But instead of hitting the highway, I parked a few blocks away, grabbed my phone, and settled in to wait. Watching the live feed from the cameras was surreal. At first, nothing happened. Sarah moved around the house like usual, tidying up, making lunch, checking her phone obsessively. Then, around noon, the front door opened, and in walked Greg. Just like that. No hesitation, no second-guessing. He strolled in like he owned the place, carrying a bottle of wine and a cocky grin. Sarah greeted him warmly, pulling him into a hug that lasted just a beat too long. Even through the grainy footage, I could see the guilt written all over their faces. They glanced around nervously, whispering to each other like teenagers sneaking out past curfew. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. But then they relaxed. Too relaxed. They started laughing, joking, drinking wine like it was just another ordinary Saturday afternoon. Except it wasn't. It was anything but ordinary. And soon enough, they'd realize just how wrong they were. There's a certain kind of satisfaction that comes from knowing you've outsmarted someone who thought they were smarter than you. A quiet, smug satisfaction that settles deep in your chest and makes you feel invincible. That's exactly how I felt as I watched Sarah and Greg through the security app on my phone, their every move captured in crisp detail by the hidden cameras I'd set up around the house. They weren't subtle about it either. Once they realized no one was home, or so they thought, they got comfortable fast. Too comfortable. The wine bottle Greg brought was already half empty within 20 minutes, and Sarah had kicked off her shoes like she owned the place, which technically she still did, but not for long. They laughed, joked, and flirted like teenagers sneaking around behind their parents' backs. Watching them made me sick to my stomach, but at the same time, it fueled my resolve. This wasn't just revenge anymore, it was justice. After an hour of letting them settle in, I decided it was time to make my grand entrance. I grabbed the spare key I'd kept in my car, slipped it into the lock, and pushed open the front door as quietly as possible. The sound of laughter drifted toward me from the living room, a sharp contrast to the storm brewing inside me. For a brief moment, I paused in the doorway, taking a deep breath to steady myself. Then I stepped inside. The look on their faces when they saw me? Priceless. Absolutely priceless. Sarah froze mid-sentence, her mouth hanging open like a fish gasping for air. Greg, who had been leaning back on the couch with his feet propped up on the coffee table, shot upright so fast he nearly spilled his glass of wine. Both of them stared at me like deer caught in headlights, their expressions shifting rapidly from shock to panic to sheer terror. "Surprise," I said, deadpan, closing the door behind me with a soft click. Miss me? For a second, neither of them moved. Neither of them spoke. The silence stretched out between us, heavy and suffocating. Then Sarah snapped out of it. She dropped the glass of wine she'd been holding, it shattered on the hardwood floor, and started stammering excuses, her voice trembling. What are you doing here? She asked, her eyes wide with fear. I thought you were on a fishing trip. Oh, I replied calmly, crossing my arms over my chest. But then I remembered something important. I pulled out my phone, tapped the screen a few times, and hit play on the live feed from the cameras. Every whispered conversation, every laugh, every groan, it played back loud and clear, echoing through the otherwise silent house. Sarah's face turned pale as she listened to the recording. Her hands flew to her mouth, and tears began streaming down her cheeks. Please, stop, she begged, shaking her head frantically. This isn't what it looks like. Oh, really? I raised an eyebrow, my tone dripping with sarcasm. Because it sure sounds like you're having a damn good time without me. Greg, meanwhile, tried to make a run for it. He bolted toward the front door, but I blocked his way before he could reach it. Oh no, buddy, I said, grabbing him by the arm and yanking him back. You're not going anywhere. You're part of this now. He struggled against my grip, his face red with anger and embarrassment. Let go of me. He shouted, trying to pull away. But I held firm, refusing to let him escape. Not a chance, I replied, tightening my hold. You wanted to be here so badly. Now you get to stay. By this point, Sarah had collapsed onto the couch, sobbing uncontrollably. She buried her face in her hands, repeating the same words over and over again. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. It would have been almost convincing if I hadn't seen the evidence with my own eyes, if I hadn't heard her laugh, seen her smile, watched her kiss another man in our home. But I wasn't interested in apologies. Not anymore. What I wanted, what I needed, was closure. And I wasn't leaving until I got it. After that night, things moved quickly. I didn't waste any time kicking Sarah out of the house. I gave her 24 hours to pack her things and leave. No arguments, no second chances. Just a simple ultimatum, get out or face the consequences. She pleaded, screamed, accused me of being cruel and heartless, but none of it mattered. I'd already made up my mind. Watching her scramble to gather her belongings was oddly satisfying. She moved through the house like a ghost, her movements jerky and unsteady, her eyes red and swollen from crying. Every so often, she'd pause and glance at me, hoping maybe, just maybe, I'd change my mind. But I didn't. I stood there silently, arms crossed, watching her destroy the life we'd built together. Once she was gone, I filed for divorce. It was a messy process, filled with lawyers, court dates, and endless paperwork, but I didn't care. I wanted it over with. I wanted her out of my life for good. As part of the settlement, I froze all our joint accounts, cutting off her access to the money she'd grown accustomed to spending freely. Let's just say she wasn't prepared to support herself without my income. But the real kicker came when I sent copies of the footage to her boss at work. Within days, she was fired for misconduct. Apparently, her company didn't take kindly to employees using company time and resources for extramarital affairs. As for Greg? Well, let's just say his wife wasn't thrilled when she received an anonymous package containing screenshots of their texts and photos of him lounging in my living room. His career tanked too, and rumors spread like wildfire through his office. Watching Sarah spiral was almost poetic. She moved in with her parents, sold most of her belongings to pay rent, and became a laughingstock among her so-called friends. Meanwhile, I kept living in the same house, working the same job, and rebuilding my life, one free of lies and betrayal. It's funny how losing everything can force you to re-evaluate what truly matters. For Sarah, losing her marriage, her job, and her reputation left her bitter and broken. She spent months wallowing in self-pity, blaming everyone but herself for her downfall. Me? I took the opposite approach. I used the experience as motivation to start fresh, to focus on what really mattered, honesty, integrity, and personal growth. These days, I'm doing okay. Better than okay, actually. I've started seeing someone new, a woman named Emily who values transparency and loyalty above all else. Unlike Sarah, Emily doesn't play games or hide behind facades. She knows about my past, and instead of judging me, she supports me. Together, we're building something real, something lasting. As for Sarah? Last I heard, she's still trying to pick up the pieces of her life. Good luck with that. Karma has a way of evening the score, and I'm glad I don't have to carry the burden of resentment anymore. Instead, I wake up each day grateful for the lessons I've learned and the opportunities ahead of me. Revenge may not be the healthiest path to healing, but sometimes it's necessary to reclaim your sense of self-worth. And in my case, it worked. Sarah lost everything because she chose to betray me. But I gained something far more valuable: peace of mind. Life has a funny way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. Just when I thought I had everything figured out, when I believed I'd finally closed the chapter on Sarah and moved on with Emily, something happened that shook me to my core. Something that forced me to question everything I thought I knew about trust, betrayal, and forgiveness. It started with a phone call, a number I didn't recognize flashing across my screen late one evening. At first, I almost ignored it. Who calls someone at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday night unless it's important? But something nagged at me, some gut instinct telling me to answer. So I did. Hello? I said cautiously, bracing myself for telemarketers or robocalls. Hi, is this Mark? The voice on the other end was hesitant, shaky even. Female. Familiar, though I couldn't quite place it. Yes, this is Mark. Who's calling? There was a long pause before she spoke again. It's Sarah. My stomach dropped. Of all the people I expected to hear from, Sarah was dead last on the list. After everything that had happened, the lies, the cheating, the fallout, I assumed she'd want nothing to do with me. And honestly, I felt the same way. Hearing her voice now sent a jolt of anger through me, but I forced myself to stay calm. What do you want, Sarah? I asked, my tone clipped. Another pause. Then, quietly, I need your help. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Help? From me? The man whose life she'd destroyed? The audacity of it made my blood boil. For a moment, I considered hanging up, ending the conversation right then and there. But curiosity got the better of me. Against my better judgment, I pressed on. Help with what? I demanded, gripping the phone tighter. You've got a lot of nerve asking me for anything after everything you've done. I know, she whispered, her voice cracking. And I don't blame you for hating me. But, please. Just hear me out. It's about Greg. At the mention of his name, my jaw tightened. What about him? He's not who you think he is. Her voice wavered, and for the first time, I detected genuine fear in her tone. Not the manipulative kind she used to use on me, but real, raw terror. He's dangerous, Mark. Really dangerous. I scoffed. Dangerous? That's rich coming from you. You're the one who cheated on me with him. You're the one who ruined our marriage. No, you don't understand, she exclaimed, her voice rising in desperation. I didn't know what I was getting into when I started seeing him. He seemed normal at first, charming, even. But then, things changed. He became controlling, obsessive. He threatened me if I tried to leave him. And now, she trailed off, choking back sobs. Now what? I snapped, irritation bubbling beneath the surface. This had to be some kind of ploy, another lie to manipulate me into feeling sorry for her. But despite my skepticism, I couldn't shake the unease creeping into my chest. He knows you exposed us, she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. About the cameras, the footage, everything. He's furious, Mark. And he's been saying things, threatening things. About you. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. For a split second, I wondered if she was telling the truth or if this was just another attempt to worm her way back into my life. But something about her tone, the sheer panic in her voice, gave me pause. Why are you telling me this? I asked, my voice softer now. After everything that's happened, why would you warn me? Because, she hesitated, as if searching for the right words. Because no matter how much I hurt you, I never wanted anyone to get hurt. Least of all you. Her response caught me off guard. For years, I convinced myself that Sarah was incapable of remorse, that she cared only about herself. But hearing her admit, even indirectly, that she regretted her actions stirred something deep inside me. Maybe it was pity. Maybe it was hope. Or maybe it was just plain stupidity. Either way, I found myself listening. What exactly did Greg say? I asked, my curiosity outweighing my anger. He said he's going to make you pay, she replied, her voice trembling. That you humiliated him, ruined his life, and he won't let it go unpunished. He mentioned your house, your job, even Emily. He knows everything about you, Mark. Everything. A chill ran down my spine. Up until now, I'd assumed Greg was just another entitled asshole who thought he could have whatever and whoever he wanted. But the idea of him being violent, vengeful, it never crossed my mind. Suddenly, the pieces began to fall into place, the way he'd acted during our confrontation, the anger simmering beneath his polished exterior. Had I underestimated him? Where are you now? I asked, my protective instincts kicking in despite myself. I'm staying with my parents, she admitted. But I can't stay here forever. He'll find me eventually. Please, Mark. I don't know what else to do. For a moment, I sat in silence, weighing my options. On one hand, Sarah deserved every ounce of pain and suffering she'd endured. She'd lied, betrayed, and manipulated me without a second thought. On the other hand, if what she was saying was true, if Greg really posed a threat, then ignoring her warning could put not only me but also Emily in danger. All right, I said finally, exhaling sharply. Here's what we're going to do. First, you're going to file a restraining order against Greg. Second, you're going to report him to the police. And third, I paused, steeling myself for what I was about to say. Third, you're going to tell me everything you know about him. No more lies, Sarah. If you're serious about this, you'll cooperate fully. She hesitated, then nodded. Okay. Whatever you need. Thank you, Mark. Don't thank me yet, I thought grimly. If this turns out to be some elaborate scheme, you'll wish you'd never called. Over the next few days, I worked closely with Sarah to gather evidence against Greg. It wasn't easy, every interaction between us was fraught with tension and unresolved emotions, but we managed to compile enough information to take to the authorities. Text messages, emails, voicemails all painted a disturbing picture of a man spiraling out of control. As it turned out, Greg wasn't just a cheater or a liar, he had a history of toxic behavior stretching back years. Former coworkers described him as manipulative and vindictive, while ex-girlfriends recounted stories of harassment and intimidation. One woman even claimed he'd stalked her after their breakup, showing up uninvited at her home and workplace. The more I learned, the angrier I became, not just at Greg, but at myself for failing to see the signs earlier. All those months ago, when I set my trap and confronted him in my living room, I thought I was the one holding all the cards. In reality, I'd underestimated him completely. And now, thanks to Sarah's warning, I realized just how close I'd come to disaster. With the police involved, things began to escalate quickly. Greg was brought in for questioning, and while he denied any wrongdoing, the evidence against him was overwhelming. Surveillance footage placed him near Sarah's parents' house multiple times, and his phone records revealed a series of threatening texts sent to both her and me. Meanwhile, Emily noticed a change in me. She could sense the weight of what I was dealing with, even though I hadn't told her the full story. One night, as we sat together on the couch, she reached over and took my hand. "You've been distant lately," she said gently. "Is everything okay?" I hesitated, unsure of how much to share. But looking into her eyes, I knew I couldn't keep it from her any longer. So I told her everything, from Sarah's call to the investigation against Greg. To her credit, Emily listened without judgment, offering support and understanding when I needed it most. "I'm scared," I admitted, my voice breaking. "Not just for me, but for you too. What if he tries something? What if I can't protect you?" Emily squeezed my hand reassuringly. "We'll figure it out together," she said firmly. "But you can't let fear control you, Mark. You've already come so far. Don't let him take that away from you." Her words gave me strength, reminding me of why I'd fought so hard to rebuild my life in the first place. No matter what happened next, I refused to let Greg win. The investigation into Greg's behavior intensified over the following weeks, but it didn't come without consequences. As law enforcement dug deeper into his past, he became increasingly erratic, his texts grew more aggressive, his movements less predictable. It was as if he knew we were closing in on him, and desperation had taken hold. For the first time in years, I found myself genuinely afraid, not for myself, but for Emily and Sarah. If Greg truly was as dangerous as Sarah claimed, then no one around me was safe. One evening, after another long day of coordinating with detectives and relaying information to Emily, who remained supportive despite my growing paranoia, I received a text from an unknown number. My stomach dropped as I opened it. "You think you're so smart, don't you? Exposing me, ruining my life. You'll regret it." The message wasn't signed, but there was no mistaking who it was from. Greg. He'd somehow managed to get my personal cell number, bypassing whatever precautions I'd put in place. I stared at the screen, my hands trembling slightly. For all my planning, for all my efforts to outsmart him, he still seemed to be 2 steps ahead. "What is it?" Emily asked, noticing the look on my face. I hesitated before showing her the text. She read it silently, her expression darkening. "This isn't okay," she said firmly. "You need to tell the police." "I will," I replied, though doubt gnawed me. Would they really be able to stop him before he acted? Or would this just escalate things further? That night, I barely slept. Every creak of the house, every shadow outside the window felt like a potential threat. By morning, I was exhausted but determined. I called the lead detective on the case, Detective Harris, and forwarded him the text. His response was immediate: "We're stepping up surveillance. Stay vigilant, Mark. Don't engage with him under any circumstances." Easier said than done. 2 days later, I came home from work to find someone waiting for me on my front porch. At first glance, I thought it was Sarah. She'd been reaching out sporadically to update me on her situation, but as I approached, I realized it wasn't her. It was Greg. My heart skipped a beat. He sat casually on the steps, scrolling through his phone as if he belonged there. When he saw me, he stood slowly, a smug grin spreading across his face. Well, he drawled, shoving his hands into his pockets. "Look who decided to show up. What the hell are you doing here?" I demanded, stopping a few feet away. My pulse raced, adrenaline coursing through my veins. Part of me wanted to turn around and leave, call the cops right then and there, but something kept me rooted in place. "I just wanted to have a little chat," Greg said, feigning innocence. "No harm in that, right?" "There's plenty of harm," I shot back, my voice low and steady despite the storm raging inside me. "You're trespassing. Leave now, or I'm calling the police." He chuckled, shaking his head. "Always playing the tough guy, huh? Must be exhausting." "Not as exhausting as dealing with scumbags like you," I retorted, pulling out my phone. "Last chance, Greg. Walk away." For a moment, he looked like he might comply. Then his demeanor shifted, his smile faded, replaced by a cold, calculating glare. "You made a big mistake messing with me, Mark. Bigger than you realize." Before I could respond, he turned and walked off, disappearing down the street. I watched him go, my grip tightening on my phone. Once he was out of sight, I dialed Detective Harris and reported the encounter. Within minutes, patrol cars were canvassing the neighborhood, but Greg was long gone. Later that night, Sarah called again. Her voice was frantic, almost hysterical. "Did he find you?" she asked before I could even say hello. "Yes," I replied, keeping my tone calm. "He showed up at my house." "Oh God," she whispered, her breath hitching. "I'm so sorry, Mark. This is all my fault." "It's not your fault," I said firmly, though part of me still blamed her for dragging me into this mess. "But I need answers, Sarah. All of them. What else haven't you told me about Greg?" She hesitated, then sighed heavily. "There's something else. Something I didn't want to believe until now." "Tell me." "He has connections," she admitted reluctantly. "People who owe him favors. Dangerous people. That's why I was scared to report him sooner." I thought if I stayed quiet, maybe he'd leave me alone. But now, her voice trailed off, choked with emotion. Now what? I pressed, my patience wearing thin. Now I think he's using them against you, she confessed. Against both of us. The implications hit me like a freight train. If Greg had ties to criminals, or worse, it explained why he seemed untouchable, why he continued to evade accountability despite mounting evidence against him. And if those connections extended to retaliation, then everyone involved in the case, Detective Harris, Sarah, Emily, and me, was in grave danger. We need to go public, I said suddenly, the idea forming as I spoke. If we expose him completely, his crimes, his connections, we can force the authorities to take action. They won't be able to ignore it anymore. No! Sarah exclaimed, panic rising in her voice. That's exactly what he wants. If you do that, he'll come after you full force. Please, Mark, don't make this worse. Her fear was palpable, but I couldn't let it sway me. Too much was at stake. I'm sorry, Sarah, I said quietly. But I can't keep living like this. None of us can. That night, I sat down with Emily and told her everything: Greg's visit, Sarah's revelation, and my plan to expose him publicly. To her credit, she listened patiently, absorbing every detail before responding. You're putting yourself in a lot of danger, she said finally, her voice soft but firm. Are you ready for that? I don't know, I admitted, running a hand through my hair. But I can't sit back and wait for him to make the next move. Not when I have the power to stop him. Emily studied me for a moment, then nodded. Then I'll stand by you, she said resolutely. Whatever happens, we'll face it together. Her unwavering support gave me strength, reminding me of why I'd fought so hard to rebuild my life after Sarah. No matter how messy things got, I refused to let fear dictate my choices. Not anymore. The decision to go public with Greg's crimes wasn't made lightly. I knew it would expose me and everyone connected to this mess to unimaginable risk. But staying silent felt like surrender, and I'd spent too long rebuilding my life to let someone like Greg tear it apart again. If exposing him meant risking everything, then so be it. At least I'd be fighting back instead of waiting for the next blow to land. Over the next few days, I worked tirelessly to gather every shred of evidence we had against him. Text messages, emails, voicemails, surveillance footage, it all went into a digital dossier that I planned to release anonymously online. The goal was simple: overwhelm the authorities with information they couldn't ignore and force them to act before Greg could retaliate. Detective Harris wasn't thrilled when I told him about my plan. This is dangerous territory, Mark, he warned during one of our phone calls. You're playing with fire here. I'm already burned, I replied bluntly. If you can't protect us, then I'll do what I have to do. He sighed heavily but didn't argue further. Instead, he promised to increase security around my house and Emily's apartment, just in case things escalated. It was a small comfort, but at least it gave me some peace of mind. Meanwhile, Sarah grew increasingly anxious. She called me daily, pleading with me to reconsider. Please, Mark, she begged one evening, her voice trembling. You don't understand what he's capable of. He'll destroy you. He already tried, I reminded her, my tone firm. And failed. If anything, this will finish the job. She didn't respond right away, and I wondered if she regretted calling me in the first place. Part of me still resented her for dragging me into this nightmare, but another part recognized the fear in her voice, the same fear I'd felt since Greg showed up on my porch. We were both caught in his web, and neither of us could escape until it was destroyed completely. On the morning of the leak, I woke up early, my stomach churning with anticipation. For weeks, I'd been preparing for this moment, rehearsing exactly how I'd execute the plan without leaving a trace. The last thing I needed was for Greg or anyone else to trace the information back to me. So I took precautions, using an untraceable VPN, creating burner accounts, and encrypting the files multiple times. By the time I hit upload, I felt confident that no one would connect the dots. Within hours, the internet exploded. News outlets picked up the story almost immediately, sensationalizing every detail. Headlines screamed about corporate corruption, domestic abuse, and criminal connections. Social media lit up with outrage, hashtags trending across platforms. People demanded justice, their voices amplified by the sheer volume of evidence presented. As expected, Greg retaliated swiftly. His lawyer issued a statement denying all allegations, accusing me, though not by name, of fabricating lies out of jealousy and spite. But the damage was done. Too many people had seen the truth, and there was no spinning it away. Greg's behavior became increasingly unhinged. He started showing up wherever Sarah's parents lived, lurking outside their house like a predator stalking its prey. One night, he even broke in, trashing the place and leaving behind a chilling message scrawled on the wall in red paint: "You'll pay for this." When Sarah called me afterward, she sounded broken. "I can't keep running, Mark," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I don't know what else to do." "Stay strong," I urged, though I wasn't sure I believed my own words. "We're close. Just hold on a little longer." But deep down, I wondered if holding on was enough. Greg's threats weren't empty, they were promises. And sooner or later, he'd make good on them. Amidst the chaos, Emily remained my anchor. She refused to let fear dictate her actions, insisting on maintaining as normal a routine as possible despite the mounting danger. "Living in fear gives him power," she said one evening as we sat together on the couch. "We can't let him win." Her courage inspired me, but it also terrified me. What if something happened to her because of me? What if Greg targeted her next? One night, after another tense conversation with Detective Harris about increased patrols, Emily turned to me with a determined look in her eyes. "We need to confront him," she said abruptly. "What?" I stared at her, stunned. "Are you serious?" "Yes," she replied, her voice steady. "Running and hiding isn't working. We need to take control of the situation. Face him head on." "That's insane!" I exclaimed, shaking my head. "He's dangerous, Emily. You saw what he did to Sarah's parents' house. Do you really think confronting him will end well?" "No," she admitted, her expression softening. "But sitting here waiting for him to strike isn't any better. Sometimes, you have to fight fire with fire." Her logic was flawed, reckless even, but I couldn't deny the kernel of truth in her argument. Every day we waited gave Greg more time to plan, to scheme, to strike. Maybe Emily was right, maybe it was time to stop reacting and start acting. Against my better judgment, we devised a plan. Using the information Detective Harris had gathered, we identified a location where Greg frequently met with his associates, a seedy bar on the outskirts of town. It wasn't much, but it was a starting point. "We'll set a trap," Emily suggested, her eyes gleaming with determination. "Lure him out, catch him in the act. Get the proof we need to put him away for good." "And if it goes wrong?" I asked, my voice tight with anxiety. "It won't," she insisted, though I could see the flicker of doubt in her eyes. "We'll have backup." Detective Harris promised to send officers nearby, ready to intervene if necessary. It was risky, perhaps even suicidal, but I agreed. For weeks, I'd been playing defense, letting Greg dictate the terms of engagement. Now, it was time to take the offensive even if it cost me everything. The night we set the trap felt surreal, like stepping into a movie where the protagonist knowingly walks into danger despite every instinct screaming to turn back. Emily and I drove separately to the outskirts of town, parking our cars far enough away from the bar that Greg wouldn't recognize them. The air was thick with anticipation and fear. Every shadow seemed to move, every sound echoed louder than it should have. My heart pounded in my chest as I glanced at Emily one last time before we split up. Detective Harris had arranged for plainclothes officers to stake out the area, blending seamlessly into the dimly lit streets surrounding the bar. They were close enough to intervene if things went south but distant enough not to spook Greg prematurely. Their presence was supposed to reassure me, but it only heightened my awareness of how precarious this situation was. One wrong move, and everything could unravel. Emily and I had agreed on a simple plan. She would act as bait, pretending to be a potential associate interested in doing business with Greg. It was risky, dangerously so, but her calm demeanor and sharp wit made her the perfect candidate. As much as I hated putting her in harm's way, I trusted her judgment. And honestly, I didn't see any other way forward. As for me, I stayed hidden, monitoring the scene from a safe distance using a pair of binoculars Detective Harris had loaned me. My role was to watch, wait, and signal the officers if things escalated beyond control. Part of me wanted to storm into the bar, grab Greg by the collar, and demand answers myself. But I knew better. Acting impulsively would only jeopardize everyone involved. For now, patience was key. Greg arrived right on schedule, swaggering through the door like he owned the place. He scanned the room briefly before spotting Emily sitting alone at a corner table, nursing what looked like a soda. She dressed casually but professionally, a deliberate choice meant to convey confidence without raising suspicion. When Greg approached her, his trademark smirk plastered across his face, I held my breath. "Waiting for someone?" he asked, sliding into the seat opposite her. "You tell me," Emily replied coolly, meeting his gaze without flinching. Her voice carried just the right mix of curiosity and indifference to pique his interest. He chuckled, leaning back in his chair. "Straight to the point, huh? I like that." For the next 20 minutes, they exchanged pleasantries, small talk designed to build rapport while subtly steering the conversation toward Greg's illicit activities. Emily played her part flawlessly, asking pointed questions about his connections and hinting at her own ties to influential figures. At first, Greg seemed skeptical, but as their conversation deepened, his guard began to drop. By the time he pulled out his phone to show her photos of some recent business deals, I knew we had him. But then something unexpected happened. A group of men entered the bar, laughing loudly and drawing attention to themselves. They were dressed casually, but there was an air of menace about them, a shared glance, a subtle nod that immediately set off alarm bells in my mind. These weren't ordinary patrons, they were Greg's enforcers, the same ones Sarah had warned us about. My stomach dropped as I watched them make a beeline for Greg's table. "Shit," I muttered under my breath, gripping the binoculars tighter. This wasn't part of the plan. One of the men leaned down to whisper something in Greg's ear. Whatever it was, it visibly unsettled him. His cocky demeanor vanished, replaced by a flash of panic. Without warning, he stood abruptly, signaling for Emily to follow him outside. She hesitated, glancing toward the window where I was stationed. Though she couldn't see me, I hoped she understood the gravity of the situation. Slowly, reluctantly, she rose from her seat and trailed after Greg, keeping a safe distance as they exited the bar. I scrambled to keep them in view, moving quickly but carefully along the edge of the parking lot. From my vantage point, I could see Greg arguing heatedly with the men, gesturing wildly as if trying to explain himself. Emily lingered nearby, unsure whether to intervene or retreat. Then one of the men turned sharply, pointing directly at her. "This is bad," I whispered to myself, my pulse racing. "This is really bad." Before I could react, Detective Harris's voice crackled over the radio clip to my belt. "Mark, we've got eyes on you. Stay put. We're moving in." Relief washed over me, at least until chaos erupted. One of the men lunged at Greg, shoving him against a nearby car. The others closed in, forming a tight circle around him. Emily bolted, sprinting toward the shadows where I was hiding. I stepped out cautiously, ready to intercept her, when a shout rang out behind me. "Freeze!" Uniformed officers poured into the parking lot, guns drawn, shouting commands at the group. The sudden appearance of law enforcement threw everyone into disarray. Greg's associates scattered, disappearing into the darkness, while Greg himself collapsed onto the ground, hands raised in surrender. It was over, or so I thought. In the hours that followed, the scene devolved into controlled chaos. Officers detained Greg, cuffing him roughly as he screamed obscenities and threats. Emily and I were ushered into separate patrol cars for questioning, though neither of us faced charges. Instead, we provided statements detailing everything we knew about Greg's criminal network, adding yet another layer to the mountain of evidence already stacked against him. By dawn, the full scope of Greg's operation had come to light. Drug trafficking, extortion, money laundering, the list went on. The authorities arrested several of his top associates, dismantling a syndicate that had operated unchecked for years. For the first time since this nightmare began, I allowed myself to breathe. But the cost of victory weighed heavily on all of us. Sarah, who had been living in constant fear for months, finally felt safe enough to testify against Greg. Though her testimony wasn't necessary to secure his conviction, it helped seal his fate. In exchange for immunity, she provided damning details about his violent tendencies and manipulative behavior. As for Emily and me, we emerged from the ordeal stronger than ever, but also wiser. We'd faced unimaginable danger together, relying on each other when the world seemed intent on tearing us apart. Our bond had deepened, forged in the crucible of adversity. Weeks later, as I sat on the porch of my house watching the sun dip below the horizon, I reflected on everything that had transpired. What started as a personal vendetta against Sarah and Greg had spiraled into something far greater, a fight for justice, safety, and redemption. Along the way, I'd rediscovered parts of myself I thought were lost forever: courage, resilience, and hope. Emily joined me on the porch, handing me a cup of coffee before settling into the chair beside mine. "You okay?" she asked softly, sensing the weight of my thoughts. "I'm getting there," I replied, smiling faintly. "It's strange, isn't it? How life can throw you curveballs when you least expect them." She nodded, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "But sometimes those curveballs lead us somewhere better." I reached over, taking her hand in mine. For the first time in years, I believed that maybe, just maybe, we'd earned our happy ending. Life has a way of teaching lessons that no classroom ever could. Over the past few months, I'd learned more about myself and the world than I ever thought possible. Betrayal, fear, resilience, redemption, they were all threads woven into the fabric of my life now, each one shaping me in ways I couldn't have anticipated. And while the scars would always remain, they served as reminders of how far I'd come. Greg's trial dominated the headlines for weeks, painting him as the villain he truly was. The evidence against him was overwhelming, and thanks to Sarah's testimony and the diligent work of Detective Harris's team, he was sentenced to 25 years in prison without the possibility of parole. His associates fared little better; most received lengthy sentences or struck plea deals in exchange for cooperation. For the first time in what felt like forever, the shadow of danger lifted, leaving behind a sense of peace I hadn't known I craved. Sarah, too, found some semblance of closure. After testifying, she cut ties with her toxic past entirely, moving to another state to start fresh. We didn't speak often, but when we did, there was an unspoken understanding between us, a mutual acknowledgement of the pain we'd caused each other and the growth that followed. Though forgiveness wasn't something either of us was ready to offer yet, acceptance came easier with time. But perhaps the greatest gift this ordeal gave me was clarity. Clarity about who I am, what I value, and the kind of future I want to build. Emily played a huge role in that transformation. She stood by me through every twist and turn, offering unwavering support even when I doubted myself. Together, we weathered storms that would have torn lesser relationships apart, emerging stronger and more united than ever before. One evening, after Greg's sentencing had been finalized, Emily and I sat on the couch flipping through old photo albums. It was something we rarely did, and nostalgia wasn't usually our thing, but tonight felt different. Maybe it was the weight of everything finally lifting, or maybe it was just the quiet comfort of being together without fear hanging over us. "I can't believe how much has changed," Emily mused, pointing to a picture of us taken shortly after we met. "Look at us back then. So carefree." "Carefree doesn't even begin to cover it," I joked, though there was truth in her words. Back then, life seemed simple, predictable, even. Now, simplicity felt like a luxury I didn't take for granted. She smiled, leaning her head against my shoulder. "Do you think we'll ever go back to that? To feeling completely safe again?" I thought about it for a moment, choosing my words carefully. "Probably not. Not completely. But maybe that's okay. Going through all of this, it made me realize that safety isn't about avoiding risks. It's about knowing you have someone who'll face them with you." Her eyes softened, and she squeezed my hand. "You're stuck with me, you know that, right?" "Good," I replied, grinning. "Because I'm not letting you go anytime soon." In the weeks that followed, I began making changes, not just in my personal life, but in how I approached the world around me. I started volunteering at a local domestic violence shelter, sharing my story with others who had experienced betrayal and abuse. It wasn't easy opening up about the darkest moments of my life, but seeing the impact it had on others made it worthwhile. Knowing I could help someone else find strength in their struggles gave me a renewed sense of purpose. Emily supported my decision wholeheartedly, joining me occasionally to lend her perspective as well. Watching her connect with survivors reminded me why I fell in love with her in the first place: her empathy, her kindness, her ability to see the best in people even when they couldn't see it themselves. We also talked about the future, our future. For so long, fear and uncertainty had clouded my vision, making it hard to imagine anything beyond survival. But now, with Greg behind bars and the threat of danger gone, possibilities stretched out before us like an open road. We dreamed of traveling, starting a family, building a life filled with laughter and love. Things I once thought were lost forever suddenly felt within reach. On a crisp autumn morning, I stood in the backyard of our house, watching leaves swirl in the breeze. The air smelled of earth and wood smoke, a comforting reminder of seasons changing and new beginnings. As I sipped my coffee, I reflected on the journey that brought me here, the mistakes, the heartbreaks, the triumphs. Betrayal had nearly broken me, but it had also taught me resilience. Fear had paralyzed me, but it had also shown me courage. Loss had left me empty, but it had also created space for growth. Without those experiences, I wouldn't be the person I am today, the person capable of loving deeply, fighting fiercely, and embracing life fully. Emily joined me outside, wrapping her arms around me from behind. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, resting her chin on my shoulder. "Everything," I admitted, turning to face her. "How far we've come. How lucky I am to have you." She smiled, her eyes shining with warmth. "We're lucky to have each other." And she was right. In a world that often feels chaotic and unpredictable, having someone to share it with makes all the difference. Someone to laugh with, cry with, dream with. Someone to remind you that even in the darkest moments, light still exists if you're willing to look for it. As we stood there together, surrounded by the beauty of nature and the promise of tomorrow, I knew one thing for certain: whatever challenges lay ahead, we'd face them side by side. Because sometimes, the hardest journeys lead to the most beautiful destinations.